Hello and welcome to Health Dialogue Show. I am Dr. Bhumika and September is marked as Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month, a time dedicated to raising awareness about one of the most serious and often overlooked cancers affecting women. Today we are joined by a leading expert in the field to discuss an important and emerging concern, the rise of ovarian cancer in younger women. We'll explore risk factors, early warning signs, the role of genetics, and why early detection remains a major challenge. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Anjali Patil ma'am to the show. Dr. Anjali Patil ma'am is a cancer surgeon, laparoscopic and robotic surgeon with an experience of more than 30 years in gastrointestinal, breast and gynecological cancers. She's presently working as consultant surgical oncologist at Saifi Hospital, Breach Candy Hospital and Asian Cancer Institute, ACI Kumbala Hill Hospital. She's passionate about teaching and is an honorable assistant professor in the Department of Surgery, Grand Government Medical College and Sir J. J. Hospital, Mumbai. She has numerous publications in international scientific journals and has co-authored two medical books. She's a pioneer in the field of minimally invasive oncosurgery at an international level and has been invited as faculty in various countries. She was previously the Deputy Director of Surgical Oncology at 18th Medical Center. I welcome you to the show, ma'am. It's a pleasure to have you on board with us today.
Hello, Bhumika. Thank you for that introduction. And yeah, I would really like to speak. And the ovarian cancer awareness is an extremely important topic, and I'm very happy that you have brought it up. I think the
Right.
young women do need to know a lot.
Definitely, ma'am, definitely. So we'll start. My first question to you is ovarian cancer is often thought of as a disease that affects older women. So why are we seeing a sudden rise in cases among younger women today?
So, where ovarian cancers is concerned, there are certain ovarian cancers that do occur have always occurred in younger women, and these are the germ cell tumors and other tumors which occur only in the younger women. We see them more often in younger women, not just now, but even previously. So, these are more often, but the germ cell tumors, the borderline tumors, the sex cord tumors. Of course, the sex cord tumors are very rare, but all these are seen in younger women, in even in young girls. So that's a different set of ovarian cancers. They have a better, most of them have got a better prognosis compared to our standard ovarian cancers that occur in older women. In older women, the cancers that you do see are are the epithelial ovarian cancers. So these are the cancers which used to be more in the older age group, but now we are also seeing them more in the younger age group. First of all, is this statement that it is happening more often in younger women true or not? Yes. Today, after practice of say 35 years ago, when I started my practice, the kind of patients we were getting, the girls were married at a younger age. In fact, in rural India, the girls used to be married. I mean, I used to get patients who are married at 16 and 17 and having children, and they had a different set of problems. They had problems related to their obstructed labor, anemia, and tuberculosis. And suddenly, and we never saw ovarian cancers in the epithelial ovarian cancers in those girls or young girls. Over a period of time, in the past 35 years, what I have been seeing is that even younger girls who are maybe just 20, 24, 26, 30, in which we would not really see ovarian cancers in them, we are seeing these patients more and more often. What is the reason? To understand these reasons, we have to understand that there has been a change in the pattern in which we live. So we need to go down and see the etiology of ovarian cancers. So the etiology, that is the causative factors why ovarian cancers occurs, there's no definite evidence that only a single factor is responsible for the occurrence of ovarian cancers. It's a multitude and a combination of different factors that lead to any kind of cancers, not only ovarian cancers. So these factors, you might call them as genetic factors, in which we have a lot of genetic predisposition that happens. There is a family history of ovarian cancers. When we test them genetically, we see that there are certain genes that are implicated for the formation of ovarian breast cancers. So, ovarian breast, endometrial cancers, we all relate it to a family history. Then apart from that genetic factor, there is an endocrine history also. So we define endocrine history, that is increased exposure to certain kinds of female hormones, especially to the exposure to estrogens, is seen to be associated with ovarian cancers. And of course, the most important reason why we are seeing increased incidence today is more related to not only the endocrinological factors but also to the environmental factors, which include the lifestyle factors. So, uh, if we talk about the lifestyle factor, uh, most important is that we, the women, are getting, maybe it is the exposure to the education and uh, exposure to different media contents and everything. The girls are maturing much earlier. Maybe it is also related to our diet. We have, the girls are getting a much better diet today. Maybe some of the other dietary factors may also be implicated. Maybe there are hormones coming, things coming into the diet that affect your hormones at a younger age. So we see precocious puberty, or puberty that used to occur at a much later date is occurring much earlier today. So the early onset of puberty, late menarche, late reproduction, that is having children at a much later age, is implicated in ovarian cancers. Not having children at all, that is, we call that as nulliparity. Not having children, having a pregnancy that has reached up to full term. Uh, all this is related to, all these were known to be the protective factors against ovarian cancers. Uh, Having children at an early age, having having multiparity, that is having more children, all this was related to a protective effect against ovarian cancers. So all these things have changed. Apart from that, of course, we have to look at the lifestyle changes in the girls. Do you know post traumatic stress disorder is associated with twice the incidence of ovarian cancers? So, stress is such an important factor. Are the girls today being exposed to more stress? We do need to check that out, whether they are working girls, they are studying. I see a lot of girls undergoing stress. They are not sleeping enough. Lack of sleep is associated with increased incidence, just as stress is related to increased incidence of cancers. So we are seeing this in younger women. Apart from that, of course, the standard factors associated with any cancers, like smoking, alcohol. So tobacco and alcohol are both carcinogenic. So we see a lot of younger women who are smoking, and these are definitely known to be associated with uh, with ovarian cancers, or any kind of cancers for that matter. Apart from that, in environmental, it's we don't even realize that, when a young girl is born, a young child is born, we are putting talcum powder onto their private parts, on the vulva, because of the sweating, and then you get diaper rashes, and you keep putting a lot of talcum powder. uh, that has been associated with formation of ovarian cancers. We have evidence to show that in later life, use of talcum powder in early childhood onto the labia is associated with formation of ovarian cancers later in life, because this travels along the vaginal route into the uterus and the fallopian tubes into the peritoneal cavity. So you get a lot of peritoneal cancers. peritoneal cancers, ovarian cancers, and all these are interlinked. They may be arising from the, sometimes we say they are possibly arising from the fallopian tubes. But all these are adnexal tumors. We call them as adnexal tumors, are basically what we talk about as ovarian cancers. Um, Early menarche, late menopause, not having children, that is nulliparity, having children at a later date, uh, all these are increasing your risk of use of talcum powder. All these we have seen has increased your risk of ovarian cancers. But yes, use of oral contraceptives in fact reduces the risk of ovarian cancers, as has been seen in certain studies. So, in depending on how many years you have used it, the longer use is associated with reduced risk. So, why does this happen? Is because the ovulation is suppressed when you are taking the oral contraceptive pills. There has been, there is an implication that fertility treatments, IVF, girls are not getting married, at an earlier age, the age that they should have got married and they should have had children. So what happens that when they don't have children, there is a lot, and even if they're getting married early, there's a lot of many families, there's a lot of familial pressure on the girls to have children. So they undergo different kinds of IVF treatment. They're exposed to different kinds of hormones, and this has been implicated, though not definitely proved, in increasing the incidence of ovarian cancers. Increased lactose, similarly, increased lactose consumption has also been associated with increased incidence of ovarian cancers, though even that is not, we don't have definite evidence how much lactose consumption or what. It does not mean that we should stop drinking milk. It could be due to the fact that, especially in India, we don't have the right, there is no monitoring about what are the kinds of hormones being given to the animals. So, through the cycle, uh, through the hormones are given to the cows or the buffaloes, and then that milk comes to us, and of course these hormones come through them, through the milk to us. Maybe that could be implicated, though in India we don't have definite studies that has seen how much of hormones is being used in India, and we don't have any regulations regarding it. Apart from this, when we go down to endocrine factors, mm, endocrine factors is related to not only to what I have said about you're having early menarche and menopause and all, not having children. That again also, apart from environmental, it comes into the endocrinology factors. But a sedentary lifestyle, obesity, lack of exercise, all these contribute to increasing the incidence of ovarian cancer. So if you have a family predisposition to ovarian cancers, you are obese, your lifestyle is sedentary. Now a lot of, you know people, they don't even go out into the sun, they don't go for the walks, they are going to the office early in the morning, they don't even see this, they go to the office maybe early or maybe late, but they are not exposed to any sunlight, because you go in the car, you come back, by the time you come back it's dark, you are stressed out, you're not sleeping on time, you don't get enough vitamin, you don't form enough vitamin D, and all these things. Having enough vitamin D is very important, because it improves your, it is necessary for your immunity. So your low levels of vitamin D, we see that a lot of, at Safi and in Bombay, other hospitals, we get a lot of patients who are coming from the Gulf countries, and whenever I check their vitamin, and even in India, of course, even in the Indian patients, we see that their vitamin D levels are very low. And this is just because of the lack of sunlight. You need to be exposed to sunlight to get the vitamin D. And of course, you can take the vitamin D tablets, but it is not, you don't know what else is it that the sunlight is giving you. So these factors are all very important, and as doctors, we keep them in mind, and we try to counsel the patients regarding this.
That was very nicely and very a detailed explanation. Yeah. So my next question to you is, what are some of the early signs and symptoms of ovarian cancer that young women often overlook or misattribute?
Ovarian cancers, whether it's a younger patient or an older person, it is very difficult to attribute certain signs and symptoms to any of the ovarian cancers, because they present these signs and symptoms present at a very late stage. A lot of times it could just be like, some patients say that I'm having just discomfort in the abdomen, I'm feeling a fullness in the abdomen, I'm having pain in the abdomen. So for this, you need to be show your doctor, even if the symptoms, you might have change in your periods, you may feel a lump in the abdomen, and sometimes, but most of the patients will not present with any signs and symptoms. A lot of them will come to us when it is at a very late stage, when already there is fluid forming in the stomach and the abdomen. In fact, I'll tell you a very interesting incident. There was this young lady, very fit, and she was doing exercises and yoga every time. And she said, I was, I seem to be fit, I was doing everything, but my yoga teacher said that I'm asking you to do all the exercises, but your abdomen is not getting, flat. I think there's some problem. It's showing, the fullness is not normal. So she came down. We did an ultrasound and we discovered that there was a big mass in the abdomen, and it was reaching right above the umbilicus. It weighed almost about uh, 800, 900 grams, which was, quite a large mass. And it was noticed by her yoga teacher that no, you're not normal if you're doing all this exercise and it's still not, your abdomen is looking full. A lot of them associate this fullness to that, no, no, I'm putting on weight. And so, because of the laxity of the abdominal wall, you cannot make out that you do have an ovarian mass inside. So it would be very difficult to say that this specific symptom we should be looking for. Yes, but if you have uh, fullness in the abdomen, you are feeling abdominal discomfort, nausea, vomiting, having difficulty in passing urine, having difficulty with your motions, but this does not necessarily mean that if you have all these symptoms, you are having ovarian cancers. It is better to get yourself checked. I had this young girl recently. Uh, she called up her father from the USA. She's been studying and performing very well, doing very well in the USA and studying in the USA. And she called up her father that she's getting backache. And so they did just her, they did the uh, a general abdominal checkup because she was having abdominal pain and backache. And they discovered that there was, the abdomen, there was a big mass in the abdomen. And we just brought her down to India and did all the tests, and it was a cancer that had spread everywhere. This girl has been studying uh, so hard all these years. She's been not looking into her health problems. She's been ignoring all her signs and symptoms. So it is very difficult, and especially with the young girls who are, our bodies are used to a lot. Indian bodies are used to a lot of sunlight. So when your children are going abroad, when you are going abroad, you have to see to it that you are taking enough of vitamin D. You have to check up your vitamin D levels regularly, and the stress of studying that, sometimes that the younger girls have on themselves, it does contribute to a lot of ovarian cancers and all cancers in general.
Absolutely right, ma'am. So, how can young women assess their personal risk, ma'am, especially if they don't have a family history of ovarian cancer?
So, as such, like in breast cancers, after the age of 40, we recommend that you undergo a regular mammography every year, especially after the age of 40 and especially after the young age of 45. For young girls, we do recommend that they should do self breast examination to look for lumps and all that. But in ovarian cancers, if you don't have a family history, we don't have any screening methods to look for ovarian cancers. Uh, the only way that you can, the only thing that you can do if you don't have a family history, or if you have a family history, is that you must understand what are the etiological factors, what are the causative factors, what are the preventable factors that you should be undertaking. And we really don't, there are no blood tests, there is no specific screening method. Sometimes yes, sometimes we are doing a sonography for something else. Say suddenly a girl is not having her periods, or a girl is a young adolescent girl who is supposed to have started her periods, now she's not getting her periods, she's getting a fullness in abdomen. Then of course she's brought to the doctor, and then we do an ultrasound, and then we detect an ovarian cancer in that patient. A lot of them are the germ cell tumors. Or of course for some other symptoms, say you can do an ultrasound of the abdomen, and then we discover that yes, there is a lump, there is a ovarian tumor, or there is fluid in the abdomen, or there are masses in the abdomen, in the ovaries. And sometimes there is this fear that, oh, I have got PCOD. Yes, one factor I forgot to mention is that if you have endometriosis, uh, then there is an increased risk of ovarian cancers with endometriosis. So if you have endometriosis, um, it is better to get your self screen regularly. And of course, endometriosis does respond to hormonal treatment. Uh, Having getting married, having children does protect you from the hormonal effects, the estrogenic component, which is a protective effect in endometriosis. And but of course, that's not the reason that you get married. But yeah, these things do help. But there is an increased incidence of ovarian cancers in patients of endometriosis. So there is no single test that we can offer for screening and for ovarian cancers. But yes, if there is a family history of ovarian cancers, then it's a different matter altogether. Then we are doing the tests.
And my next question to you is how important is genetic testing, like BRCA1 or 2 in younger women, and who should consider getting tested?
That is what I was exactly getting to. If you have a family history, say your mother, now the family history, you must understand, is not just related to, okay, you have ovarian cancers in your paternal grandmothers, so your father's mother, or from your father's side, it is less likely. But if it is coming from the mother's side, see, your mother has had ovarian cancer, or your mother's sister, your mother's mother, or your mother's sister's daughters, or your sisters. So all these, this is what we define as family history of ovarian cancers. So in this, if they have got a higher, if any of these, if you have got this family history in your family, especially if it is if it is a single relative, who has had it at a younger age, then and especially if their genetic testing is done, then you have to get yourself, you are usually, we counsel them that it is better that you get yourself tested genetically for not only BRCA1 and BRCA2, which are the two main genes which are implicated in ovarian and breast cancer. But they are not the only genes that are implicated in ovarian cancers. There are many other genes. There is this, we call it as Lynch syndrome, in which we have colorectal non polyposis colorectal cancers that we see in them. But these are also associated with increased incidence of ovarian as well as endometrial cancers. So that is one genetic syndrome that is associated with ovarian cancers. Apart from that, we do, nowadays we have these entire genetic panels in which we do the germline and somatic mutational testing, especially if there's a very high risk of getting genetic risk of getting ovarian cancer. So the young girls, then we do recommend that they do, we counsel them for getting this done. And as you know, the famous, I mean, a lot of people know the famous story of Angelina Jolie. She had both her ovaries removed as well as her breasts removed, because she has a very high risk for ovarian as well as breast cancers because of her genetic history of her mother and grandmother and all these. that kind of genetic history, definitely you need. It is better then, because why do we counsel, and why do we? I mean, it's so traumatic at such a younger age to get these surgeries done. But why do we counsel them for this? Because breast ovarian cancer has got a very poor prognosis. Compared to the other cancers, it does have a poor prognosis. If you detect it in a very early stage, stage 1, you would get, say, a 93% of survival. But most of them are detected in, have already spread locally into the abdomen, in which the survival is would be much lesser, say around 70% survival or so. And a lot of them come with metastatic disease, where it has spread to other organs also in the body. So in that case, the survival goes down much lower to about 30%. And the treatment is also very, in the advanced stages, the treatment is also uh, very aggressive. In ovarian cancers, the treatment has to be aggressive. When the patient comes down at an early age, then we and at an early stage, then we do try to conserve the opposite, depending on what kind of ovarian cancer it is, then we try to do fertility preserving, so that the patient can conceive and have children. But most of them come at much later and more aggressive tumors. Then they have to undergo what we call the surgery as cytoreductive surgery, in which the uterus, the tubes, the ovaries, and the entire, wherever the cancer spread in the abdomen, the peritoneum, all that is removed, along with, there is a part of the a fatty organ on the related to the large intestines, called as the omentum. We remove that, and the abdomen is overall cleared completely of any kind of cancerous tissue. Even the smallest spots of cancer need to be removed wherever we find them. And this treatment is very aggressive. If we find that it is on the intestine, that part of the intestine is removed. So treatment for ovarian cancers, most of the time, and whatever lymph nodes it is spreading to, we have to do all that entire clearance of for the staging, uh, as well as for the clearance. So that is the kind of aggressive treatment that is required for ovarian cancers. And of course, for that, apart from that, there is chemotherapy. And it chemotherapy itself is associated with a lot of side effects, but counseling is very important. You must remember that a lot of young girls, whenever they get cancers, they are extremely afraid that they will lose their hair. How would they, would they face their friends? So all this counseling is important, that all these treatments and their side effects are all going to be temporary. I've had girls as young as 26 years old and 24 years old who have had ovarian cancers maybe 10 years ago, and 5 years ago. All these, they are surviving now, and they're absolutely normal. You wouldn't be able to tell, because they have very nice hair. They're doing their work. They are in the IT. They are working. They're supporting their families. Maybe they cannot have children, but yes, there is a life beyond that too. So you can have a happy lifestyle even if you are a young girl and you have been diagnosed as ovarian cancer. The treatments today we have are excellent. We have a lot of targeted therapies available. We have a lot of therapies that, you know, by doing your mutational testing, by doing the testing of the various kind of receptors that are there. Accordingly, we have the newer forms of treatment which are extremely effective, and we have got very good prognosis, and the prognosis keeps improving day by day. So that's very important.
My last question to you is, what message would you give to young women who might think they're too young to worry about ovarian cancer?
It's very, maybe because of my age or whatever it is, it's very difficult to advise the young girls that your career is not going anywhere. It is going to happen. You're not going to lose out on career, but you have to take care of your health. You have to plan your your life. If you want to get married, you want to have children, remember you have to do it at an earlier age, because then you risk yourself about having the infertility treatments. You think that you can freeze your eggs for a later date. Imagine, that at that age when you are not fit enough to run after your child, the kind of energy you have today for running after your child, it's a big responsibility. So if you do want to have children, do have them at an early age. Your job is not going anywhere. Stress, extremely important to look into the stress part of your life. There is no point in getting stressed about a lot of things. You need to be able to manage that stress, and sleeping on time, waking up on time. Weight management is very important. Healthy food is important. uh, Regular exercise, waking up in the morning, doing your exercises, going out into the sun, not just into your gym, because you're not going to get enough light in the gym. You have to go out, you have to go outdoors to get the natural elements, also to increase your vitamin D levels. You have to move your body, you have to also maintain your weight. All this is important. Unhealthy lifestyles have to be avoided. Food that is unhealthy, that would increase your weight, has to be avoided. Tobacco is a big no no, a big no no to smoking. A lot of times people feel that no, no, I'm doing this hookah and all that. It doesn't contain anything, it doesn't have any. But yes, it does contain. It is coming without being filtered, and it contains so many chemicals which have not even been evaluated for the effect on in giving cancers. Nicotine in any form, even if it is an e-cigarette, is still going to give you nicotine. Peer pressure is a big thing. You look at, your senior colleagues. Oh, she's smoking and she's so successful, and you start feeling that no, no, I have to smoke, and then that means it cannot be associated. That smoking is not associated with your success. Eating the right kind of diet, sleeping on time is very important. Having children on time, and also if you have a genetic history of breast cancers, you have a family history of breast cancers, getting yourself checked, going in for genetic counseling is very important. But there is no need to get stressed out about it. It's not that every person who has a family history of breast or if there is a family history of breast cancers also associated with having an increased incidence of ovarian cancers. Increased incidence of endometrial cancers is also associated with, these three cancers are very much interrelated: the ovarian, breast, and the endometrial cancers. So all these, you have to be aware that if there's a family history of all these, we have to take care. And any signs and symptoms that you feel that yes, this could be it, better to show the doctor, a good doctor, and get yourself checked. And yeah, I think that's important. And a few things that I said about, like endometriosis, of talcum powder, of if you have a problem, showing it on at an earlier stage is much better than putting being an ostrich and putting your head under the sand, and not exploring what is the reason why you are having these symptoms. So I would
So thank
definitely
you.
tell the younger generation that you don't need to be afraid of ovarian cancers. We have a lot of new treatments. We have treatments like HIPEC today, in which the chemotherapy is put inside the abdomen for certain cancers that have spread. We have got treatments like targeted and personalized cancer care. We have uh, what we used to have a lot of side effects because of certain chemotherapy drugs. We have a lot of new drugs which are giving a much less side effects. We have got drugs to deal with the side effects, and all these effects are temporary. If you do have a an ovarian cancer, definitely um it is treatable. It can also be, you could have a very good lifestyle. You could live a completely normal life otherwise, after you have been diagnosed and treated. And you should not be afraid. And I think that's the message I should be giving them.
Right, ma'am. That was really informative, ma'am, and thank you for sharing such valuable insights. Thank you for your time, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.